I think firstly acknowledge that although we're busy, we also have a bunch of people we work with and communities behind us. And like for me, it's one thing I like to do is I learn as I go. And for me, it's a 30-year plan. I don't tell much people, but I have a 30-year plan of how I want to see myself in the future. It's a whole draft plan. I think in terms of drive, for me, it's my parents. And everyone, I'm sure for a lot of people, it's their parents, but for me, it's also about growth and personal growth. And I talked about this a few weeks ago with one of my groups, was personal growth and just seeing like more of your perspectives, more of your ideas in spaces where they need to be. And if you feel like it's meant to be there, it's there. And you see it there and you feel good about it. And I hope that makes sense too. But I think for me, the biggest driver is my parents and my grandparents. Like, as I said, I'm an international student. So when I moved over in 2020, the one thing my granddad told me was, leave the room cleaner than it was, or in Fijian, and it's like, leave your room cleaner than it is. And it was an analogy with it. Whatever space you go in, wherever you go, make sure it's better and in a better situation than when you first entered it. And this is just something that's driven me in terms of all the other places I've been. And it's for my parents too. They work so hard. Like my dad's been my dad works for United Nations and he's been there for I think 10 plus years now, and it's just all the work he does is just for his kids to have better educations, better lives. Like my parents are humble stories. My grandparents stayed in the village. My granddad was a farmer. My grandma was a teacher in the village. She ran her school, and then just as they were about to retire, they moved to the city to give their kids a better education. And now my dad's where he is, and his siblings are all successful in their respective fields. So apologies. And it's just one thing that drives me as well, is like seeing, when you see your family, seeing how hard they work. For me, it's being able to know that the work they do pays off. And my dad asked me, why you do all these things? Why you do all this? Like, it makes me feel good, but it makes me feel good inside. But on a personal note and like personally inside, it makes me feel good that the work I do now will give him the future that he wanted to see in his day. Like when he was a child, he wanted to see more islanders. Like Fiji back then was pure colonialism, white people running everything. Back in his day, he would have wanted to see more Fijians running this, more Fijians heading this up. And I think for me, driving that into how I am, how I live, what I want to do in the future is making sure that his dream is my future and the future of my siblings as well. And yeah, I get emotional when I think about it, but it's just the hard work they do. Like my dad's in Africa and my mom's back in Fiji. My dad left in 2020, so like they dropped me off. I didn't see him until last year, so that was 3 whole years of COVID, but mismanaged of time. And he came and surprised me in school, and it's funny when you see the senior prefect crying in the office and you see a whole bunch of videos after it. But yeah, I think in terms of drive and my biggest pushing power is, like what my granddad said, is leave the room cleaner than when you first found it. And also just making sure that my parents, as proud as they are now, is that they know that their name, the work they put in, has a legacy that can't be moved at all, no matter what happens with time.
I was either, a beneficiary child, or, my mum's on ACC now. We've been through it. We've been through tough times, and so, when I see other people that are going through hard times as well, I can totally empathize with that and understand where they come from, because, despite where I am now, I totally remember where I was as a child, and I completely don't forget it. And I think it's worth acknowledging that a lot of what I went through as a child actually shapes me today. And I guess that's the other part about it is, and this is like one thing that I encourage young people to think about is, are you going to let the hardships that you experienced as a child determine your outlook for the future? And how are you going to let it shape you? Like, are you going to see, like, an aggressive and violent home life turn you into a violent person that goes and bashes people for what you want? And I totally could have become that. And so, you know, I'm blessed that and I'm lucky and I'm fortunate that I didn't become that person, that I didn't become that side. And I think part of that was also thanks to those people that stuck around me as a child and kind of kept me on the good track, and just tried to share the love that I needed. Because, you know, no doubt I felt loved as a child. I think despite the fact that there were those hardships, I never did not feel loved by those around me, and I think I'm very fortunate with that. And I think that's another thing that shaped the path. But yeah, I think, you know, young people should ask themselves, would you let the hardships that you went through as a child, how are you going to let it shape or influence what you want to do? Are you going to let it are you going to let it drive you into doing something good for yourself and those around you and your family and your future? Or are you going to go down the other track? And, you know, there is that level of accountability that each person has to take. But also it is a whole, you know, village raising the child thing as well. And what is nurturing that child inherently comes from the village, and the village that child was brought up in. So yeah, it's a big complicated thing, but it's something that I'm figuring out. It's day by day, you know. And I've had time to reflect and think about it, but yeah.
Mandate.